Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blue Devil Beat. I'm your host, Ranjan Jindal, here joined in my studio with three wonderful people. First off, my co-host, Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It was a great break.
You care to expand?
We went and saw the Panthers on Sunday. Matthew Stafford MVP case shattered. Panthers playoff bound.
Yes, sir. We are also joined by Abby DiSalvo, our sports editor, for the first time on Blue Devil Beat. Abby, welcome to Blue Devil Beat.
Excited to be here.
And we're also joined once again by Ryan Hamner. Ryan had a busy Thanksgiving covering women's basketball and football. Welcome back to Blue Devil Beat, Ryan.
Thanks. Good time in Vegas.
Yeah.
Well, not for Duke women's basketball,
Yeah,
but
you had a
good Duke football win to cap off the week, though.
Hope you didn't lose too much money. Oh, okay. No comment, I guess. Well, we have a super exciting episode for you guys today. First of all, we're going to talk to Ryan and Abby about Duke football, and then we're going to talk to Xander Tilock, who's the sports editor of the Cavalier Daily, because if you haven't heard, Duke football is in the ACC Championship against Virginia in Charlotte after a chaotic series of events Saturday that ended past my bedtime, which was crazy. Then we're going to bring on Jeffrey Serber of Florida Student Newspaper because Duke basketball's ACC SEC Challenge in Cameron Indoor against the Gators is Tuesday night. So that's an exciting matchup. And then we're going to bring on Colton Schwabe, who's our Blue Zone editor, one of our men's basketball beats, because him and Caleb were in Chicago to cover Duke men's basketball's win against Arkansas. And then Mackenzie Sheehy, our women's soccer beat, because women's soccer is back in the College Cup after an exciting few weeks for them. And so they're in the Final Four, and that'll happen this Friday. And then Caleb and I will wrap it up with a discussion of all those sporting events and more. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise brought to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. Okay, so last few weeks in Duke football. Like we mentioned, Duke football is in the ACC Championship. Big reason to that is winning the last two ACC games, the 32-25 win on the road against North Carolina. Abby and Caleb were there to cover that. And then a 49-32 win against Wake Forest at home on Senior Day. Starting with the Tar Heels, Abby, I'll start with you. After the way Duke football looked against Virginia, people thought Duke was dead in the water, possibly a hangover game coming to North Carolina, but, played solid enough to win and defeat the Tar Heels on the road. What did you see in that game from Duke?
I think the Blue Devils did a really good job coming back and refocusing. At the press conference on the Monday before the game, Manny Diaz talked about how they still had a trophy on the line. They still had a chance to go undefeated on the road in the ACC, and they did both of those things, winning the victory bell for the second year in a row. So I think that was really good to see them kind of bounce back from some tough losses. And then Mensa had a good game, but I think it was great to see Duke's rushing attack really kind of pop back. Nate Shepard had 22 carries for 90 yards. Anderson Castle scored 3 one-yard touchdowns. So that was all fun to see. Helped, of course, by Todd Polino's 26-yard run on the fake punt. So that was all great.
Todd Polino's 26-yard fake punt. Ryan.
Todd Polino.
Everyone check out Ryan's feature on Todd Polino if you haven't. I think we talked about it earlier, but it's a great read. Caleb, what did you think about that game?
Yeah, I obviously covered the game with Abby. I wrote my sidebar about Coach Manny Diaz, I think all year, but especially against North Carolina, really played like Duke had nothing to lose, which Duke really did have nothing to lose at this point. The Blue Devils were very aggressive on fourth down throughout the game, most of which were successful against the Tar Heels. Mensa's stats weren't incredible, but when it mattered most, he did come through on fourth down a couple times. One of the fourth downs was a pretty bad Quayshawn Brown pass, but the rest of them were good. Todd Polino, obviously the fake field goal from Todd Polino with to really seal the game for Duke, set up Anderson Castle for his third one-yard touchdown of the day. Thought the defense played okay. At the end of the game, they thought they played really well, but throughout the game, Gio Lopez had his best game as a Tar Heel, and he hasn't been very good all year, but he was good against Duke for a lot of that game, 21 for 27, 204, and a touchdown. But really a guy that stood out to me was Jeremiah Hazley in that game. Thought he played really well. He had a big touchdown on kind of a trick play down in the red zone from Duke. He was 7 for 85 and a touchdown. He's really come on as he's gotten fully healthy as a really solid weapon for Darian Mensa, and it's always good to have a tight end. That's what Duke was missing really badly last year, and so great win for Duke. It's always good for the Blue Devils to win the victory bell.
Yeah, Hazley's played really, really well of late. I think he has a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 games, and he has 3 touchdowns on the year and has been a big weapon for Mensa. You mentioned the defensive side of the ball. Yeah. Felt like North Carolina was able to produce. Gio Lopez looked really good, especially in first half, early in the second half. Then things kind of turn around for either of you guys or both. You can talk about the defensive performance, what maybe changed from that first half to the last few possessions when Duke needed to get some stops and did.
Yeah, I think it was maybe the last drive or the drive before last. Duke really needed to stop, or it was the drive before last for North Carolina. And Duke had just turned over on downs with Clayshawn Brown. North Carolina was already relatively far into their own territory, and Duke got 2 sacks in a row. I want to say Aaron Hall and Josiah Green had the 2 sacks on Gio Lopez. For a game where Duke could not get a stop for most of the game, getting a 3-and-out late in the game like that to get the ball back led to the Polino fake field goal, and the touchdown was huge. Then again, the last drive, I think Luke Margott had the sack on that drive to knock North Carolina back and force them to kind of throw a Hail Mary at the end of the game that didn't fall. So I thought the defense, as much as we've criticized them on this podcast, and they've struggled at times this year against the Tar Heels, they really locked in when it mattered most and gave the visitors 2 really good drives.
No. Anything for you, Evie?
Oh, yeah, I think especially you mentioned Luke Margott. I think some of the linebackers have really stepped up. Obviously, injuries have kind of marred that room during the season. It's caused some difficulties. So some of the defensive problems are, I think, just a natural result of that. But you've seen, as the season goes on, that room kind of step up and find more consistency, which is really great to see.
Yeah, the injury concerns have been a big problem for linebackers and the secondary. Jaden Francois was mentioning that on the midweek presser, I think last week, how, injuries have really decimated this team, and they haven't had the best, consistency week in and week out on the defensive end, but it seems like over the past few weeks when they needed to get stops, they did it when it matters. And that's a great segue into Wake Forest, because although Duke's defense gave up a bunch of points to Wake Forest, got a bunch of turnovers when it mattered most in that 49-32 win. Ryan, I'll start with you. What were your overall takeaways from that game? Because obviously forcing all those turnovers was so important, and it was a pretty good bounce back game for the offense as well for Duke.
Yeah, both of those things are certainly true. It felt like I was watching Duke in the black and gold, if you will, the way that Wake Forest was turning the ball over. The early season Duke, I guess. And you feel like without some of those turnovers, the game could have been a lot closer and maybe could have gone Wake's way. The way Robbie Ashford was playing, he was 27 of 43, 342 yards. It's a lot of yards. And so Wake was obviously able to put up a lot of points, but so was Duke. And the way the offense kept their foot on the gas pedal, I think, was very inspiring. Nate Shepard, another great day for him. Best freshman running back in program history at this point. Leads in yards and scores now, which is really cool. And then Darian Mensah broke the single-season passing touchdown record as well with a score to Samir Hagans, who had a great game, ACC Specialist of the Week. 80-yard return was really exciting. Reminded me of the one against Clemson where he scored, as well as the touchdown pass. So the offense was certainly firing. It felt like they, as talking to Caleb, they were trying to put points on for the Sports Source analytics.
Just in case.
Just in case they needed that tiebreaker. But yeah, I think the game showed that Duke is starting to build momentum and shows the persistence they have developed over the season, able to even bounce back from the North Carolina game, you could say, and then defeat a even better opponent in the Demon Deacons.
And another big play in that game was a special teams fake punt from Cade Reynolson. Wasn't planned, according to Manny Diaz in the press conference. Is that right? So
that's right. Someone asked Coach about it, and he said, yeah, he just kind of made that decision on his own. I think the quote was, that was Cade being a baller. And yeah, I mean, we're seeing the special teams guys that in an area that hasn't been Duke's best this year, earlier in the season, and even last year, step up and make big plays when it matters.
Caleb Cooper-Barquet had another huge day, 8 receptions for 83 yards. You've been singing his praises all year, but ended this regular season at least with a solid game. I know Mensah's passing attack over the past few weeks hadn't been as solid as it has been early in the year, but this was a nice game for him. What did you see with the Mensah-Barquet connection there against Wake?
Yeah, I asked Darian after the game, and he was like, I've been saying all year, but he's just always open. Talking about Cooper, and I mean, he's right. Cooper had, 8 catches against Wake Forest for 83. He's just such a reliable receiver. He's a great route runner. He's also really good drawing pass interference. That's where he gets like 1 or 2 a game. That's one of the pass interference. He had, I know, at least 2 against North Carolina when Abby and I covered. But just the offensive attack as well as a whole was really good against Wake Forest. Thought the running backs got involved really well in the passing attack. Shepard was 5 catches for 60. Ayers Castle had 2 for 18. Again, Hazley, like you mentioned, scored a touchdown. Darian said after the game he didn't think it was his best game, which maybe it wasn't his very best, but I thought he played really, really well. He didn't turn the ball over. He ran for a touchdown, first one of the season for Darian, on a dive, on a scramble. But yeah, I mean, he ended the season 17 touchdowns in the ACC, no interceptions. That'll play every single week. So I think, he has a chance at being the first-team All-ACC quarterback this year, and he's had a really special season for Duke. So Duke will need that one more time against Virginia this week.
Well, there you have it. Duke's playing Virginia this week. Let's end by going on a roundtable. All you guys quickly talk about what do you think Duke needs to do to win this game? Maybe is there something you're keeping an eye on for Duke? Obviously, the last time Duke and Virginia played, Virginia dominated here in Wallace-Wade Stadium. So we'll go around. Caleb, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Abby and then Ryan.
Yeah, I'll go two quick keys. I think Duke needs to establish the run early and often. They have, two of the better running backs in the ACC in Shepard and Castle. They got to get them going downhill and just control the clock against Virginia, especially with a defense that's decimated. And then going to that point, secondary, they've been kind of rough all year, but they got to have one dying breath against the Cavaliers. They're going to need a better performance than they did against Morris the first time around if Duke wants to have a chance.
Yeah, I'm going to second that. I think the consistency in the defense is going to be really important, especially limiting the run game. They did a better job with that against Wake Forest. Hopefully they can keep that up. And I also think just the mentality of it. They lost to Virginia once. They kind of need to get that out of their head and go play for the ACC Championship. There's a lot of outside noise. Obviously, they're used to kind of ignoring that. But they're going to need to tune it out and just win this game for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, as well as not making too many mistakes themselves. They've definitely gotten better in the penalty department as the season's gone on. El Chavis has an article about that. Hopefully there'll be a part 2 to show the improvement there about penalties. That as well as just getting out ahead early. I think Duke is generally better in games when they get out and don't let opponents score early. So hopefully they can dictate the game right from the kickoff and have a better shot at defeating the Cavaliers and winning an ACC championship.
It'll be exciting. Abby and I will be there, live coverage for the Chronicle. Well, we're going to talk about it with Xander in just a second, so stay tuned. We'll be back with Xander of the Cavalier Daily. All right, everyone, we're now going to welcome back to the podcast after just a couple weeks, Xander Tilock, the sports editor of the Cavalier Daily, to preview Duke football's matchup against Virginia. Xander, welcome back to Blue Double Beat.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you too. So if you were an avid watcher of the show, you know that we welcomed Xander on just a couple weeks ago to preview Duke-Virginia's football game. And in that game, Virginia won 34-17. Since then, Virginia defeated their rivals, Virginia Tech 27-7, en route to an ACC championship berth. First of all, Xander, what did this mean for the program? I know Virginia made the conference championship a few years back, but feels a little different this year around, especially after the past few years of Virginia football. So talk about what this means for the program.
Absolutely. And I might be butchering this quote, but back in July, when Chandler Morris first met with the team, the first thing he said was, "I didn't come all the way to Virginia as a Texas boy to win 5 or 6 games. I came here to win a championship." And right now, great quote. Right now, he is on the precipice of doing just that. This team, they have that it factor. This statistic actually says it all, that the UVA offense is converting 49% of its third downs, and the defense is only giving up 27% on third down. This team, they live for those high pressure situations, and this has been an absolutely magical season for the entire university community.
Yeah, Ranjan mentioned the one game since we last talked to you was Virginia Tech. Obviously, Virginia Tech's had Virginia's number in the rivalry, especially as of recent. What did you see from the Cavaliers in that game, and how was it to close out the season for Virginia beating their rival?
The biggest thing that I saw from that game was elite defense. The Virginia defense has gotten better and better each week, but only holding Virginia Tech to 7 points on that one long touchdown is incredible. Virginia Tech, if you don't count that touchdown, they crossed their own 40-yard line one time the entire game. This was an absolute domination on the defensive side of the football, and that's without Cam Robinson, because he tore his ACL in the win at Duke. He will not be available for the rest of the season. That's a major loss for the Virginia defense. Maddox Marcellus stepped right up. I wrote a follow story about him. He had an interception in the first quarter, had half a sack, a tackle for loss, led the team in 9 tackles. For this to be the next man up, playing like that, this defense is truly one of the nation's best.
Adding on to that defense, feels like the last time Duke and Virginia played, one thing that really impressed me was that Virginia defense, the way they were able to stifle Duke's offense. I've never seen a game like that this season for Darian Mensah and receivers in co. It felt like the coverage was great, pressure was great. I also thought on the offensive side of the ball, Virginia did a great job running the ball consistently with Jamari Taylor. What did you take away from that Virginia Duke game coming here, and what can Virginia I guess what can Virginia also take away and try to replicate in this ACC Championship rematch?
On the defensive side of the ball for Virginia, first of all, Darian Mensah is an incredible quarterback, one of the ACC's best, if not the ACC's best. And Virginia's defense did an exceptional job putting pressure on him. Duke has a high quality offensive line, but Mitchell Melton and Fisher K-Mac were in the backfield seemingly every single play. They held Duke to 42 yards rushing.
Mhm.
Nate Shepard, also one of the ACC's premier players. And it seems like they had just figured out the offense on that given day. Barkate was well contained by Manuel Carnley and Jason Pavard, except for that touchdown in the fourth quarter.
Right.
And defensive coordinator John Brodzinski had a banner day. You go to the offensive side of the ball, and for Virginia, it seems like Duke has been struggling on the defensive side of the ball throughout the year on multiple occasions. And with Chandler Morris at that point coming back from what looked like a concussion or potentially re-aggravating the shoulder, he seemed comfortable and in control. That's obviously a huge key to this game. In the Wake Forest loss, Chandler Morris didn't play most of the game due to injury. That obviously hurt Virginia. So they need to stick to their bread and butter, which is winning the turnover margin, which they've done in most of the games this year, winning on third down, and finding some creativity on offense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about keys to win the game. I think you just hit them on the head. Virginia's obviously had, kind of the same strategy all year long. It's really done well. Last time we had you on, we asked you about an X factor. I think you mentioned one of the offensive linemen for the Cavaliers. Pick an X factor for this game, maybe somebody different, somebody that, Virginia fans and Duke fans should be looking out for on Saturday.
Absolutely. I think it's actually, I'm going to give you two. I'm going to go with Charles Harris at receiver and Jamar Taylor at running back. Those two were pivotal in the win against Duke last time out. Those two both had solid games against Virginia Tech. And actually, Jamar Taylor in that game became the first ACC running back since 2021 to have a passing touchdown and rushing touchdown in the same game.
Nice.
Last guy to do that was Clemson's Will Shipley, coached by Tony Elliott. So Jamar Taylor and the team's leading receiver, Charles Harris, those two are definitely folks to look out for.
Yeah, man. Okay, so do you think Virginia can do it? What is your score prediction for this game in Charlotte? Obviously, there's a lot riding on the line, especially for the Cavaliers here. What is your score pick for the game?
I think this will be an absolutely exciting game. The odds currently have Virginia favored by 2.5. I'm going to go Virginia 37, Duke 24. I think that the Cavaliers are red hot on offense and defense. I think that Darian Mensah is a fantastic player, and this could go either way. But Virginia looks determined, and this team, I genuinely believe, has what it takes to go be competitive in the college football playoff.
Well, there you have it. Xander, you've been busy over the past couple of weeks. I've been watching. You've been dropping a lot of articles. So even though we only had you a couple of weeks ago, tell people where they can find your stuff. What have you been working on? And plug the Cavalier Daily.
Thank you. So you can find me on X at Xander Tilock, XanderTilock. And please go check out our Cavalier Daily content. Go to cavalierdaily.com, click on sports. I highly recommend checking out the editor's pick section in particular. The folks at Cav Daily do great work, just as the folks at the Chronicle do. And I highly recommend go read both papers every single day.
There you go. Make that part of your routine. Well, Xander, thank you for coming back and talking to us. This is going to be an exciting game, and Xander's going to be there covering, so watch his stuff, and then we'll have two of our reporters there too. So, Xander, thank you so much, and best of luck to Virginia, and have fun in Charlotte, man.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. We're super excited to be joined here by Jeffrey Serber. Jeffrey's the men's basketball beat reporter at the independent Florida Alligator. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Jeffrey, let's start by giving a rundown of the season so far. Last year, Florida obviously won the national championship, but the team looks a lot different this year, starting the season off 5-2. Could you give us the differences between last year's and this year's team and the SparkNotes version of how this year has gone so far?
Yeah, so, I mean, the whole makeup and leadership has really shifted. Last year, Florida was led by its backcourt, Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, Will Richard. These guys were leading the team. I mean, Walter Clayton Jr. went on an insane run during March Madness, but we all know that. And when those guys leave for the NBA, I mean, you guys are used to it at Duke. You need to replace and you need to find a way to build up an identity again. And part of it was having four of Florida's front court pieces return. Micah Hanlockton, Ruben Chinyelu, Alex Condon, and Thomas Houck all returning to the Gators, and they really made up the leadership for this year's team and how the team was going to play. Specifically, you want to talk about change. Thomas Houck, who really came onto the scene during March Madness, at least as establishing himself and really becoming a dominant piece for this Gators team. He made a transition from power forward more towards a small forward position, and you'll see him play that power forward position occasionally as well. But that was a big change for him. Gave him a little bit more liberty to and freedom to play and move around as he wants. But really, the way Florida's dominated and won its games is by taking care of everything on the glass, winning in the paint, and relying on its front court. In the backcourt, Florida brought in two new faces: Boogie Flan, the sophomore transfer from Arkansas, and then Xavier Lee, a transfer from Princeton. And for those two in particular, Xavier Lee took them a little while to settle down. They both struggled shooting from three, and Boogie Flan was still having an impact defensively. He's one of the better on-ball defenders you'll see in college basketball. Uh, but Xavier Lee was struggling to shoot, and finally against Princeton, he got a couple shots to go down. And really, the two games that Florida lost against Arizona and against TCU, Florida struggled to have a dominant performance on the glass. They got out rebounded in the first half against Arizona, and they also struggled to stay out of foul trouble. Condon and Chinyelu fouled out against Arizona, and then against TCU, we had four players with four fouls, and Boogie Flan and Xavier Lee later fouled out of the game, and it just puts Florida in a tricky spot. So Florida is at its best when its front court is leading and the back court is more of a supporting cast, whereas last year the back court was leading and the front court was kind of that supporting cast.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously Florida's 5-2. The more recent loss to TCU, a little more unexpected compared to the Arizona game. Can you just talk a little bit more about that game and what you think went wrong for the Gators over Feast Week?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just I think Florida kind of took for granted the type of team that TCU is. They are a very tough team. They're really well coached. Uh, but at the end of the day, Florida didn't value uh, their possessions. Too many turnovers, and then on the defensive end, too many fouls, like I talked about earlier. If you have four guys get four fouls, really tough on Golden to manage the minutes because there's not a lot of depth in this team, especially once you start to lose guys in the front court. Um, I know Victor Mikic had to play a little bit. I think Alex Lloyd had to play the freshman, and Golden doesn't want to have to rely on that. He wants to have his guys like Condon, really set the tone and be dominant factors, but stay in the game too. And the fouls were something that Florida needs to continue to improve on. But especially taking care of the basketball was something that it's too many turnovers, and even against Providence, I think we had four turnovers in the first 4 minutes, and then finally the Gators got settled down a little bit. But when Florida wasn't shooting the ball too well to start out, especially from beyond the perimeter, I mean, you really, really have to maximize every possession because it just makes it so much more difficult. And when you're not shooting the ball well, and when you're not taking care of the ball, it's hard to win any game.
Bouncing off of that 3-point struggles, like you mentioned, Florida, excuse me, is shooting 27% from three, which is 320th in the country. Fland and Lee both under 25%. Do you feel like that's more so of, just missing open shots type of a mental hurdle, or do you feel like the shot selection has been poor leading to missed 3-point opportunities, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think at times you could see, in particular, Xavier Lee trying to force it a little bit, especially in our home games where we're able to, get the support of the crowd and play a little bit more freely. You see Xavier Lee kind of force it a little bit. I remember it was against Florida State. He had like a step back 3-pointer way too early into the shot clock. It wasn't a good shot at all, especially with that game going down towards the wire. Not a shot you want a guy who's been shooting 15% from three to shoot. But I think Florida's gotten good looks for most of the struggles, especially through the first 5 games. Coach Golden was really preaching the fact that Florida did a good job at stuff that doesn't require talent, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but they're doing the fundamental things right. They're rebounding, and they're well, outside of the TCU game, taking care of the ball, and I think there wasn't so much of a sense of urgency, especially to begin with the shooting. Florida was getting good looks. Boogie and Xavier Lee, they were open, and even Urban Klavzar too struggled a little bit to start from beyond the arc, but they were getting open looks, and I think it started to loom and become a little bit more of a mental thing. But this team has confidence, and the fact that Xavier Lee continues to shoot the three, I think is something for Gator fans to be hopeful. The last thing you want is to bring in a guy who's a comes in as a great 3-point shooter, and when he starts to miss, he's not shooting open threes. You want him shooting open threes. He's getting these looks, especially when the front court draws so much attention. And I mean, against Providence, he had a season high 20 points, and he proved himself. Boogie Flan also had 4 3-pointers, and I think that was a small glimpse of what the Gators can do, and they'll look to build off of it tomorrow.
Yeah. You mentioned, it's been up and down season for some of the guys on the Florida team, but I would say Thomas Howell's probably been the most consistent guy for Florida. He's the leading scorer, someone whose game I really like. Can you just give a little bit more of a scouting report on him and what Duke fans, should know about Howell leading into tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Thomas Houck is a little bit of a jack of all trades, and I think that's why he's playing the small forward position he is. He can do a little bit of everything. He can defend on the ball if you need him to defend bigger guys. I mean, he did that a lot last year when he would fill in for Condon at the power forward spot, and he can, I mean, hit from three. We saw him in Florida's, I believe it was against Texas Tech, where we made that miraculous comeback. I mean, that was Thomas Houck's doing. He started that with drilling a couple 3-pointers, and that's what he does. He does a little bit of everything, but I think what's most impressive and what most NBA scouts are going to get to appreciate from him is he has a great ability of getting to the free throw line. I think against Providence, he did a great job. I think he went to the line 11 times against Providence. I could be wrong there, but against Arizona in the second half, where the Gators were trying to kind of ride the storm a little bit, stay in the game. Houck did an incredible job of getting to the free throw line and keeping the Gators in the game and slowing down the pace a little bit. And I think that's what he does best. When he's getting to the line, when he's getting to his spot, that's when Florida's at its best. That's when he's at his best. And he does a really good job of slowing down the game when it needs to be slowed down, but then he can give you these explosive plays, these 3-pointers, these alley-oop dunks that you can get and really use to get on the run.
Yeah. Alex Condon recently I know he missed the Providence game with what they said was a precautionary injury. I'm assuming he's good to go tomorrow.
Yeah, so they talked actually today to Todd about it in press conferences. So he's good to go. It's more of a precautionary thing. Ruben Chinyalu's got a pretty big wingspan. He's a strong dude, and Condon was on the wrong end of a Chinyalu. I think it was his elbow or arm hit him in the chin or something. Something along those lines. He's not the only one to be on the wrong end of a Chinyalu hit. But besides that, he'll be good to go. Golden said his mindset was more of you don't want to have players that are already limping and dealing with injuries heading into conference play. Even though the Providence game was a little bit of a must-win, it wasn't a situation where he felt that it was necessary to risk the health of Condon, give him the day off. And I mean, coming up against Duke, we're going to need everyone. We're going to need as many pieces in our front court to be healthy and as strong as possible to deal with Boozer and company. And I mean, he'll be good to go, and hopefully it'll create a great matchup in the front court.
It's a perfect segue looking ahead to this matchup. Listening to you, it seems like Florida and Duke have very similar strengths on the front court there. Defensive-oriented teams, great on the glass. Preview this matchup a little bit for us. Is there an X factor on Florida that you think needs to play particularly well? What does Florida need to do to defeat Duke here?
Yeah, I think if you look at the last couple of games, I think Urban Klavzar coming off the bench has been really crucial for Florida. He's been a little bit more consistent as you could be with how poor shooting the Gators have seen, but he's had some great performances in the last 4 games. I think he's averaging around like 15 points or so, almost 16 points in the last 4 games. And he had a great performance against Providence. a solid one against TCU, and his ability really to receive the ball and just catch and shoot. And honestly, he's done a little bit of a better job of creating his own shot too this season. He's been really impressive at hitting these 3-point shots. And when second unit players start to come in, I think he's going to be really important. Duke has a great defensive efficiency rating, rank among one of the best in NCAA, especially with field goal percentage on the defensive end. And I think this game's going to be won on the team that does a better job out on the perimeter. And if Florida wants to do a better job out on the perimeter, I truly think Urban Klausner is going to be the one to have to start it, so that way Xavier Lee and company can kind of settle in as well.
Great.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but if you have a score prediction for tomorrow, we'd love to hear it.
Oh gosh. I mean, this is tough. You got two teams that really are gonna fight and scrap. I don't know. I mean, part of me wants me to say Florida wins because it'd be nice to that have that headline: Gators upset Blue Devils in Cameron Indoor. But no, I don't know. I think if I want to be logistic and I want to be smart, I would say something like 77 to maybe like 72 Blue Devils. But if I was a Gators fan, me maybe wishing to, write that headline, I wouldn't say it'd be out of the ordinary for the Gators to come out on top with around like a similar score in the 70s, maybe like a 75-70. But I think Duke comes out on top here, like a 77 to 72. A really close game, and I really think it's going to be won out on the perimeter. These teams are too good in the front court that one is going to be superior over the other. I think Florida's inconsistency from beyond the arc, I think, are going to hurt them, especially going on the road to Cameron Indoor. I mean, there's not many places like it, so it's going to be hard for guys like Xavier Lee to settle in early.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one for sure. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for joining us. Lastly, where can people find your work? You do great stuff over there for the independent Florida Alligator. So where can people find the newspaper and then you as well personally?
Yeah, thanks for the praise. Yeah, I mean, if you just search up in Google the independent Florida Alligator, all of our stuff is there outside of sports coverage too. If you're interested in that, we've got thousands of articles that are just great stuff over the years. Our sports content's really good too. If you want to find my stuff, feel free on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You can find me at Jeffrey Serber, so it's Jeffrey, and then SERB as in boy ER. That you'll find more of my personal stuff, updates on the Gators, and anything else. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to talk about some college hoops with you guys, and hopefully we'll have a nice and entertaining game for the college basketball world tomorrow.
Likewise, man. You're awesome. Well, thank you, Jeffrey, again, and we'll be right back. Well, thank you so much to Jeffrey for talking about Florida. Jeffrey was fantastic. We are now joined in the studio with our Blue Zone editor, Colton Schwabe, one of our men's basketball beats. Colton, welcome back to Blue Devil Beat.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, of course. Well, Colton is here because him and Caleb spent their Thanksgiving up in Chicago in Colton's hometown to cover Duke basketball's 80-71 win against Arkansas. First of all, how was the trip? How was Chicago, Caleb? Your first time in Chicago?
Second time in Chicago.
Oh,
First for work. So it was fun. It was a really good time. We spent Wednesday, Thursday, Friday there. It was very cold. It snowed a little bit. But yeah, the game was super fun, which Colton, tell us a little about, coverage. How was it?
Yeah.
It was good. It was Caleb's first time not in the summer in the city,
Yeah.
right? So
Quite cold.
Where'd you take
Great.
him around to?
We went around. We saw the river, Chicago River. We got Portillo's for
Yeah.
lunch, which is a very classic Chicago
Mm.
fast food restaurant. We had Lou Malnati's for dinner, which the Duke basketball team also had for dinner after the game.
Oh.
Per John Shire. So more on that later. But that's another classic. It's a pizza restaurant with
Deep dish.
deep dish, but we also got thin crust, which I made sure to to lay down the point that Chicago-style pizza isn't only deep dish. There's also a thin crust Chicago style, which many people prefer to deep dish.
Yeah.
I would prefer. I prefer. Colton also prefers.
Yes. And then we got to see the United Center, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
We saw the Bean.
Yeah.
It's classic there. Went to the Art Museum. Good
Mhm.
time. But yeah, the United Center was definitely the highlight.
Well, this podcast is also brought to you by Chicago. No, I'm just kidding.
Visit Chicago.com.
Yeah, we're giving a Chicago ad here. Okay, let's talk some basketball. 80-71 win for the Blue Devils. Obviously, the big story here is Cam Boozer's explosion. I think we mentioned on Blue Devil Beat last week that this would be a chance for him to go off because of Arkansas's lack of physicality. Let's get some overall thoughts on the game. Colton, I'll start with you. Why do you think Duke was able to, pull away in the second half and defeat Arkansas here?
It was kind of covered in the post-game conference, but they were kind of just hammering down the fact that Cameron Boozer couldn't really be stopped on the offensive end. And I think sort of during these big neutral zone games early in the season, we're kind of learning that Duke's star player this year compared to last year, I think Cameron Boozer is kind of more he has his thing on the offensive end, which you could argue that Cooper Flagg didn't really have his thing, especially late in the game. So he'd kind of turn and slip trying to do some move towards the end of the game. But Cameron Boozer kind of just he can just put his shoulder into the defender and take it to the house. And there wasn't really anything that could stop him in the second half. I think there was some run, I think it might have been early in the second half, where there was a span of like it was their big run early in the second half where he literally contributed to every point, either via assist or scoring on his own. So that was kind of the story. When Duke went into the second half down, he just kind of turned it on and never looked back.
Yeah. I think the main thing, and he said himself after the game, was Arkansas and Coach Calipari refused to double Boozer the entire night. And I think his big game kind of just shows the trouble that he is for opposing coaches. We've seen teams so far like Kansas triple teamed him at some points because he's just so powerful at the rim, and you just really can't. If you do that, he's such a good passer. He can dish it out to the perimeter, and so Arkansas chose to play one-on-one with Trayvon Brazile. I thought Brazile had a great game, honestly, but just not enough for Boozer. He hit 35. He was 13 for 18. Just second half especially, I think. He didn't score for the first 10 minutes, so over the last 30 minutes, he just kept putting his head down, getting to the rim. He's so good at drawing fouls. I want to say he drew 7 against Arkansas. He's up in the top of the country in terms of fouls drawn. He's really dominant. He's only continues to get better, and I think kind of dispelled a lot of the talk so far this season about him not being able to play against top-tier opponents against the Razorbacks.
Even when he was trying to pass, he made a shot that alley-oop to Pat, I think. And early on, he missed a few free throws, but it was good to see him make the clutch ones at the end when he really needed to. Caleb, your sidebar, you wrote about a little bit of Batman Robin here. Yep. The second other players who played well, one particular was Caleb Foster. For those who haven't read it, please check out the sidebar. It's really wonderfully written. But can you talk about what you thought you saw from Foster and the supporting cast around Boozer against Arkansas?
Yeah, my sidebar mostly was a little bit more kind of down to earth after Duke's off to a great start, obviously 8-0, but I think so far this season Duke hasn't established a clear second option yet on offense, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. I think having Ngongba and Evans and Caleb Foster and Dami Sarr, there's a lot of options that can be the second leading scorer behind Boozer every single night, but there hasn't been a clear pecking order so far, and I don't know if there will be. There may go the whole season where they just kind of take turns carrying the load. I thought Foster, especially on Thursday, was really, really good. Probably his best game, at least over the last 2 years. 15 points, 5 for 10. He had 8 assists. He always crashes the glass well as well, and so I thought he was just really, really good. He was steady. There was, in the second half, I think only him, Ngongba, and Cam Boozer scored any points. So down the stretch, it was really just Caleb Foster and Cam Boozer kind of playing two-man game. And so I was really impressed with Foster. I think if Duke can get that level of Caleb Foster through the rest of the year, even if he's not the second option, second leading scorer on the team, the Blue Devils will be really, really hard to stop.
Yeah, I thought he was tremendous. I thought it was his best game in a Blue Devil uniform, to be honest. With looking at the total body of the work, the way he hit that clutch three, the way he was handling the offense, handling the rock, he had a few turnovers, but 8 assists was huge for him. On the defensive side of things, in the first half, Arkansas, really lit up the scoreboard, especially early in the second half, late in the first half, they started to connect on threes, and we mentioned how talented they are. Darius Acuff was the best guard Duke has played all year. Brazil hit a couple. But then in those last 10 minutes, Duke's defense really stepped up, and Arkansas only made a few field goals right in those last few minutes. Colton, I'll start with you. What did you see from the Duke defense in those last few minutes that really stymied the Arkansas offensive attack?
I think it was just a lot of early on in the game, there was a lot of energy in terms of the Arkansas offense. Maybe they kind of let it get away from them. Arkansas is a lot of athletes on the offensive end. And I think they the young, Duke roster kind of let it, the energy get the best of them. But sort of I think they felt more that they had a hold of the game towards the end of the second half. And at that point, they could kind of settle down and just settle into their defensive scheme and not let the big moment get the best of them.
Yeah, I think, and to Colton's point, there was a lot more Arkansas fans than I expected at the United Center. I would say maybe the majority of fans were Arkansas, and they got really, really loud in that stretch where the Razorbacks took the lead in the second half. And I thought, you mentioned Acuff and Malik Thomas were really, really dynamic throughout the whole game. But I think down the stretch, I'll just shout out Nick Amini and Dame Sarr. I asked Coach Shire about Amini. It was the first question at the press conference, and he didn't have a ton of stats in that game, but all year he's just kind of an energy guy off the bench, and he switched on to Acuff and Malik Thomas quite a bit in that second half and did a pretty good job. He just made life tough for them because Acuff was really feeling it at least from deep. He's 4 for 8 in the game, and so just to have two wings like that are just super athletic, keep their feet in front of guys is really, really impressive. And obviously you have Pat and Cam and Malik down low, so Duke, has potential to be a really elite defensive team throughout the year, and they are so far. So I thought the second half they just really kind of clamped down on two freshman guards. I haven't seen that big of a game yet, really, and just made it hard for them.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was a really good game for Mania, especially on the defensive end. His length is really, really valuable for Duke. And early on, Dame Sarr hasn't quite found his comfort on the offensive end, so he played a lot less minutes. You see him. I think he's going to develop into a good player, but right now, not quite there yet, and so Hamner has stepped in to fill that nicely. Yeah, solid game for the Blue Devils. Anything else on that game from you guys?
Yeah, fun one.
Yeah, well, this week, things do not get easier for Duke.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we're recording this on a Monday. Duke will welcome Florida, like Jeffrey talked about, Florida to Cameron Indoor Stadium for the ACC SEC Challenge. And then Saturday, Duke taking on Michigan State up in East Lansing, which will probably be one of the toughest matchups of the season with how well the Spartans are playing. Caleb and I will be up there in a frigid atmosphere.
Yep.
Caleb can't get out of the cold now. This is crazy.
Yep.
So preview-wise, Caleb, what do you think Duke has to do to maybe not emerge from the stretch undefeated, but what do you want to see from Duke over these next two games against Florida and Michigan State?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Duke is Florida and Michigan State both have really, really good front courts.
Yeah.
You've seen. I think you can make the case that Boozer and Gungba are the best front court in the country. I don't think people would argue with you too hard against that at this point in the season. But Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper at Michigan State, and then like Jeffrey mentioned, the trio that Florida has are just really, really tough. So I really think it's going to be a time for Isaiah Evans and Caleb Foster. They're going to have to step up, and Dame Sarr too out there on the perimeter. They're going to need big games from those guys. Efficient shots, take care of the ball. I would say I'm more worried about Michigan State than Florida. Florida, so far, Jeffrey mentioned the struggles that Fland and Lee have had. I don't think they're going to settle down in Cameron Indoor. It's a tough environment for them to, start finding their rhythm. But I do think at the Breslin Center on Saturday, Michigan State is just so tough. They take care of the ball so well. Jeremy Fears is one of the best point guards in the country and will be the new next guard, that best guard that Duke has faced so far this season. So I think if I had to pick, I think Duke maybe goes 1-1 this week. I would lean towards the loss being in East Lansing on Saturday, but obviously a big opportunity for Duke to really cement themselves as a top-flight contender before ACC play starts.
Yeah, totally agree. I still don't want to sleep on this Florida team just because obviously the winning pedigree from last year, and you mentioned the front courts. They're going to make life difficult on Boozer. I think you might see double teams. You're going to see different looks if you're Boozer, and he struggled early against some of that physicality that Arkansas wasn't able to provide. But I'm looking at those other front court players around Duke, Malik Brown and Patrick Ngongba. especially if you're playing against Condon and Howe and Chinilo on the defensive end. Against Michigan State, Carson Cooper is a center who's very versatile. He can pound it down low. You also see Jackson Kohler, who can knock it down from 3. He's 6'9" or 6'10", shooting nearly 50% from behind the arc. So they're both talented front courts. They're both physical. So it'll be a good test. I mean, this is what John Shire wanted to do when he put both of these teams in the non-conference schedule to prepare Duke for March. And so I'm excited for both these matchups. And I think Jeffrey's spot on. It's going to come down to 3-point shooting tomorrow night in Cameron, because if Florida can hit threes, they can win. But if not, I think this is Duke's game. So
Yeah.
should be an exciting stuff. Well, Colton, thank you so much for joining us today to talk some basketball. Thank you for showing Caleb around Chicago.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
We will be right back.
All right, welcome back. We're super happy to have our women's soccer expert, Mackenzie Sheehy, here. Duke, here ahead of the College Cup, is now in the Final Four for women's soccer Friday against Stanford. So, Mackenzie, I'll just start a couple questions about the team. First, can you just give us kind of a rundown of the tournament so far, the first couple games for the Blue Devils, and kind of what's gone right for them?
Yeah, I mean, they've had a really impressive run through the NCAA tournament so far. I would argue it's the best soccer they've played all year, and they've really gotten better and better as they've gone on. But they started out round of 64 playing Elon, and that was a game that they won 3-0 with 3 goals, all from Mia Menestrella. Then they played UCF in the next round, won that 1-0. But I think what's really telling about this team is in their 2 games prior to their College Cup berth, both against Kansas and Washington, which they won 2-0 and 3-0 respectively, is I think where we really saw them play their best soccer and get a diversity of goal scorers going on. I feel like Mia Menestrella was the main scorer for them through much of the tournament. She does have 6 of the 9 goals, but they really showed their offensive depth and the different players that can be dangerous on attack, which I think is going to be really crucial for them going into the College Cup.
Yeah, I noticed you mentioned a lot of nothings or zeros there for the opposing teams. Can you just talk a little bit about Duke's defense, what makes them so good, and how has no one scored on them in the first 4 games of this tournament?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's in some senses surprising because I feel like Duke's defense at times this year really struggled. I mean, you have Cameron Roller as the center back. She's a veteran. She knows what she's doing back there. But they also, other than her and Elle Piper, who kind of plays a center back at times, kind of plays a wing position, there are a lot of freshmen that have been on that back line. And so I feel like a lot of their struggles this year defensively have been the freshmen just gaining experience, getting minutes, and getting used to the college game. And it feels like they've hit their stride defensively at exactly the right time and are finally playing as a cohesive unit. And they really look like an experienced back line that has played together for a long time, as opposed to the beginning of the year when it got shaky just having some new faces in there.
Yeah. Obviously, Duke made it to the College Cup last year, lost. For who do you think is the X factor for Duke this time around if they want to succeed and go away to the title?
I think you could say Mia Menestrella is one of the obvious ones, obviously, just because she has 6 of those 9 goals. But also, if I were Stanford, she's the player that I would make sure she doesn't see the ball and is marked. So I think there are a couple ones that I think are really key to look at. I think Kat Rader is up there as somebody who she's had a lot of assists throughout this tournament so far, but really, I think, could step up as a goal scorer, and we saw that in their latest matchup against Washington. I think Devin Lynch, as a long-range threat, she can kind of shoot from anywhere on the field. But honestly, I do think the X factor, and any announcer you've heard from the Duke team this year so far on TV has said Karina Laguerre out of the midfield. She's the one that controls their play. And every ball basically has to go through her to get to the goal. And so I think she's going to be key for Duke maintaining possession, finding those key passes so that they can break Stanford down.
Yeah. A little bit talking about our paper as a whole. I know you have a great feature about women's soccer. Just tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I talked to Lauren Martino, who is currently a redshirt freshman for Duke, but she tore her ACL before what was supposed to be her freshman year last year, playing in a summer league game. And coming into Duke, she was their highest ranked recruit, number 5 player in the class of 2024. And she was actually the highest ranked player to actually go to college. The other 4 that were in front of her ended up going pro. And basically a bunch of people thought like she was going to be this great contributor in the midfield and was going to get a bunch of key minutes. And then tears her ACL. And the other interesting thing about it, too, is her sister actually tore her ACL 10 days before that. And so I talked to Lauren kind of about her journey to fight back because ACL injuries, there's no guarantee you come back. And I also got to talk to the head of Duke Women's Soccer's sports science department, Drew Lukes, just about, his approach to how players rehab and how they come back. And the other person I talked to actually was Elle Piper, who was also out with a knee injury all of last year. About, the friendship between her and Lauren, but also just what it's like to, be injured, not just for Duke Women's Soccer, but be injured at a time when Duke Women's Soccer then made it to the College Cup and had this kind of extraordinary season. And you have to watch that from the sidelines when you were slated to be this starter and big contributor. And so it was just a really great story about, her fight back and how she's really gained a new appreciation and passion for soccer when it was taken away from her for a year plus.
Yeah, really great story. I know Kat Rader was hurt the year before, so Duke's really had some players that have gone through injury and now are back here in a big moment 2 years in a row. We had another great feature for women's soccer recently, Lucy Glenn, who is not here with us, sadly, but wrote a great feature about Kieran Hall. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe that feature, but more Kieran Hall and how you think he's done so far with the team? Obviously, pretty well, but just your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think I even saw a stat today that he's only the third head coach ever to make it to the College Cup during his first year as a coach. And I mean, I think he's done great things with the team, and I talked to him about this in the preseason, is his goal was not to completely reinvent the wheel and change everything about Duke women's soccer in one go. He really wanted to keep that culture that Robbie Church built for so many years. And I think that's really what he's been committed to, is what is that culture going to be like? And if we have a strong culture, then we're going to have a strong team. And I think it's just clear from the way the players talk about him and the play that he's been able to get out of all of them that they really trust him and respect the way he's running the program. But ultimately, the biggest test you can possibly have as a college women's soccer coach is the College Cup, especially because Robbie Church, very experienced coach in his last year, they lost in that semifinal matchup against UNC. So I think this coming weekend will be the biggest test for him to see, what he's made of as a college coach.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously the College Cup's a big test. It doesn't help when you're playing the number one team in the country, which is what Duke will do on Friday. Just talk a little bit about Stanford as an opponent. Just tell everyone when that game is on Friday, what time, and then just a little rundown of Stanford as an opponent.
Yeah, I mean, Stanford is one of those opponents that, to be honest, you never want to face. That's how good they are at women's soccer, and that's how talented they've been year after year. And I was looking at kind of the results they've had in the NCAA tournament so far, and they've won by big margins. They've gone 3-1, 7-3, 6-0, and 5-1 in their 4 games to get to the College Cups. Those are big margins. They're a team that can score. They're threatening from everywhere on the field. But I will say the thing there is that Duke also exists in a conference that's battle tested them in the best possible way. With obviously Stanford being a part of the ACC, but still, any competition you have against an ACC team in the regular season, you more often than not are going up against a ranked opponent. And so Duke is as prepared as they could possibly be to take on this Stanford team. And that's going to be this Friday, December 5th at 8:45 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah. Big College Cup in Kansas City. ACC well represented. 3 teams, Stanford, Duke, and Florida State. Just talk a little bit about, obviously, it's not guaranteed Florida State wins or Duke wins, but if Duke was to play Florida State, kind of what the matchup there would be as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that would be a very tough matchup. I think a lot of people have looked at Florida State this year and kind of been like, oh gosh, if they make it far in the tournament, they're really a big title contender. But again, I think it's the same thing, that Duke is as prepared as it can possibly be, given that it's seen so much ACC competition this year, that really at this point it's about executing. And like I mentioned at the beginning, Duke has honestly really grown this season, and particularly in the NCAA tournament. They've improved game after game, and I honestly think they're playing some of their best soccer right now, and that's exactly the position you want to be in for the College Cup.
Yeah, no doubt. Big opportunity for Coach Kieran Hall and the Blue Devils. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. We always love your input on soccer. Make sure to check out Mackenzie's coverage of the team so far this season, and the rest of our beat. They do a really good job. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
We'll be right back.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. What an episode. We had so many wonderful guests. It's a jam-packed week of Duke athletics, just to recap, like we mentioned, Duke basketball is going to play 2 games against Florida and at Michigan State. Duke football is in the ACC Championship against Virginia on Saturday, and Duke women's soccer is in the College Cup Friday in Kansas City. Let's wind down here and talk a little bit about football and postseason and the rest of that, because 2 weeks ago Duke football was dead in the water as far as the ACC Championship, and now is going to potentially play for a title. Whether that means Duke football is going to be in the playoff is probably unlikely, but it's still a big step for Mania Diaz, a team that has only been in the ACC Championship recently. In 2013 was a blowout game there against Florida State. Xander mentioned he thinks Virginia's going to win. They're favored. They have played like the better team, and the last time the two teams played, Virginia was dominant. But what's your kind of read on this game a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'm with Xander. I do think Virginia will win. I don't think Duke will play as bad as it did the first time against the Cavaliers. I think it was probably the worst performance of the year.
Yeah.
Right?
On offense, at least.
On offense. I don't think Darian Mensah will have another game like that with the game with the season on the line, championship on the line. But I think, regardless of what happens, I think this year for Duke it's been quite the roller coaster. We've been here 12 weeks on this podcast, and things have gone from 1-2 to coming back up, then losing to UConn, then having a game against Virginia. So I think it's been a super fun year to cover the team, and I think this is obviously a great way to end it, regardless of what happens. The last time, like you mentioned, 2013 was a blowout against Florida State and Jameis Winston. I don't think Duke gets blown out their second time around in the ACC Championship, but I think Virginia wins narrowly in a fun one. I think Duke will have a little bit better of an offensive showing. I still think the defense isn't going to be enough to stop Chandler Morris and Troll Harris and company. So I'll go, 35-31 Virginia in a fun one. And maybe, playoff, I agree with you. I don't think Duke makes the playoff if they win. I think they would need some things to happen, but should set Duke up regardless for, another bowl game and a good way to send a really strong senior class. That's maybe if things, they win one of these next 2 games, won the most games of any group in a 4-year stretch in Duke football history. So good way for them to go out.
Yeah, dealing with 2 coaching changes, especially the ones that committed under Cutcliffe and stayed with Mike Elko and Manny Diaz. They've talked ad nauseum about the character of that team, and obviously Duke came into the season. I think this is the first season in a while where Duke underperformed expectations. Over the past 3 years, it seems like Duke has outperformed expectations. I guess a couple years ago, there's a little bit of a caveat there with the injuries that happened to Leonard and et cetera. But still, I thought it's important to respond well at the end of the season. The games against North Carolina and Wake showed that. I tend to agree with you. I kind of have a weird feeling about this game, though. Something tells me that with the house money Duke is playing with, it's going to be a shootout. I think Jamari Taylor was just phenomenal against Duke, and I don't know. I mean, you can play with heart, but schematically, they just ran all over Duke, and Wake Forest did the same, honestly, aside from turnovers. So Duke has to get a couple turnovers to win this game. I think if Duke gets 2+ turnovers on the defensive end, it wins. If it gets below that, it probably loses.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But right now, it's a slight edge towards the Cavaliers. But generally great. Great episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make a point that Duke didn't do all this benefit from all this chaos just to go out there and lose to Virginia.
Yeah, man.
I mean, we think about the Cal game. I think Cal was double-digit underdogs in that game against SMU, and with all the Duke fans, Coach Diaz said, Coach Diaz gave the guys off on Sunday after the Wake Forest game, but said, "Hey, keep your phone nearby just in case something was to happen." And shout out, Jaron Chiave, Songapalotelli. Duke fans are a big fan of him now. I would imagine that he had a masterful performance against the Mustangs in that late night game on Saturday to send Duke to the conference championship. I think there's been a lot of talk about the ACC and how we should be ashamed that Duke is in the conference championship, but it's how it's designed. Things happen like this, and it's just tiebreakers and how they work. I do think the ACC was a good conference this year. I think there's a lot of pretty solid teams in the ACC. Miami, obviously is pretty angry they're not involved, and I do think they deserve a spot in the playoff. I think they've been really good this year, but it's very funny. I think the outcome of Duke winning the conference championship just to not make the playoff is pretty funny, and one that could really has a strong chance to happen here this coming up weekend.
Yeah, it's funny. That's a perfect segue to playoff talk. I will say one thing. Diaz noted in his press conference yesterday that this senior class, I think, has won the second most ACC games over the past 4 years.
Yeah, behind Clemson.
And Duke is 2-0 against Clemson in that stretch. So that is interesting. Obviously, that doesn't mean that Duke deserves to be in the ACC title this year, which, it's fine. But it's still who would have thought we came into this school freshman year that if somebody would have told us that Duke football would get the second most ACC wins is pretty wild. So anyway, reflecting on that, segueing to the playoff, second year of this extended format, there's a lot of chaos that could happen.
Yeah.
The seeding's different this year, obviously, because what happened last year with the power conferences in the top four, Clemson being a high seed up there, or I guess Clemson was the lower seed, but other conferences. What do you think about this playoff? There's some teams you're watching out for?
Yeah.
Obviously, the Lane Kiffin news is big. Reflect on anything in the past week of college football.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like you mentioned, I think Duke is probably wishing that the format of the seeding would stay the same. I think you look at the playoff. It's a really good week of conference championships. I think too. It'll be a lot of really fun competitive games. To me, I mean, I think maybe they haven't been talked about a lot just because they've been so good. But Ohio State, I mean, no one's really challenged Ohio State all year. I know Coach Sarkisian at Texas made a big deal after their win against Texas A&M. Like, hey, we went to play the number one team to open the season, and that might be the reason we missed the playoff. But Ohio State is really that good, and Julian Sain has been spectacular. That matchup with Fernando Mendoza in Indiana on Saturday in a 1-2 game is going to be an absolute thriller. So I think Ohio State will be the pretty heavy favorite to go back to back. They have Jeremiah Smith, they have Caleb Downs. They have Reese at linebacker. They're loaded. Outside of them, Texas Tech has been a fun team this year.
Mention them.
An example of what happens if you kind of like Virginia, if you really just go all in on football, even in a landscape where a lot of teams have a lot of money and resources. Texas Tech really committed to football this year, and it's really paid off. They've been really, really fun to watch. Jacob Rodriguez, has had a couple rushing touchdowns at linebacker for the Raiders, trying to pump up his Heisman case, which has been fun. But yeah, I think. A lot of its usual suspects. You have Georgia and Alabama and Oregon and Notre Dame. I'm assuming Notre Dame will make it. Them and Miami, I think, is a very interesting discussion to have, considering Miami did beat Notre Dame. But yeah, I think it's really fun. Georgia and Alabama will be another good one this week. A&M will make it with Coach Oko. It'll be a fun playoff, I think. Who knows who will win, but I think, the Buckeyes will be the favorite there. Group of five wise, it's probably Tulane and North Texas, one of them, whoever wins. Duke's going to hope that Troy will beat James Madison and Boise State will beat UNLV if Duke wants a very outside chance at making the playoff. But yeah, I think it's been a super fun season, I guess. I don't even know. Heisman, maybe Mendoza, maybe Sayin. Diego Pavia is trying to pump his case up. But yeah, I think it's been a great season. It's nice to have a couple teams that have never made it before the playoff, like Ole Miss and Texas Tech. So A&M, I guess, too. So it'll be a really fun playoff, and this week will be obviously change up some things in the seeding, but I think most of the field's pretty set.
Yeah, you captured it there. And with Texas Tech, they're fun, man. They're flying under the radar at 11-1, but their offense is outstanding. Both investing on the offensive line, their rushing attack is great. Baron Morton's been tremendous at quarterback, and another team out of the Big 12 that could surprise some people after last year. What Arizona State was able to do could replicate that. These SEC teams at the bottom are interesting. We mentioned a while ago, I think I mentioned Texas A&M and Oklahoma as being possible flyers just because of how solid both of their defenses are. Oklahoma is such like a low floor, high ceiling, in my opinion, because
outcomes.
John Tierkin has played really well at times and then sometimes has not been very careful with the ball. He's dealt with injury, but they're a team that with their defensive floor can compete with anyone, but also lose to anyone. So I'm interested to see. Yeah. Anyway, playoffs going to be fun. College football is going to be fun. Last thing that we neglected to mention is Duke women's basketball, who also has a big game this week at home against LSU this Thursday at 9 p.m. Over Thanksgiving break, not a great start to the season for Kara Lawson's crew, going over to Las Vegas for the Players Era Invitational and, two pretty bad games. I will say the South Carolina game, Duke played really well in the first half. Duke was playing solid in the first quarter, and then South Carolina blitzed them in the second quarter. Duke responded well in the third quarter and got it back down to single digits, I want to say. But in classic South Carolina fashion, the fourth quarter was solid for them. And then against UCLA, completely different story. just being blitzed in the first quarter. I think it was 30-7 or 32-7. But look, Duke has not played at home a lot this season, and so I think that could help the Blue Devils. For me, the thing is two things. One, Duke needs a backup point guard to relieve Tyana Mare at times because she is running the point for 40 minutes, and she's played really, really well this season, but, I mean, that's tiring. And so I think depending on Emily Skinner's health, Kara Lawson has said it's a lower body injury for a while. Don't really know exactly what that means or the extent of the injury, but she needs to come back. And then secondly, Duke's 3 and 4, namely Jaden Donovan, Delaney Thomas, probably need to up their offensive game if Duke wants to contend, because right now they are double teaming Todi Fournier. Like, people are not guarding Jaden Donovan on the perimeter right now. So, or just really anywhere with the ball. So how can she fit into the offense? She's a very, very talented player who's phenomenal on the defensive end, can get rebounds. But you really see this lack of spacing on the floor because of that.
Yeah. LSU on Thursday is at, 9:15? It's a late one.
Yeah.
ACC Challenge. Duke drew two pretty fun opponents this year, I would say. Florida and LSU both at home. Men's and women's basketball. LSU now, they have Lane Kiffin and Kim Mulkey, quite the cast of characters. In Baton Rouge, we didn't talk about Kiffin much, but I think that's been the headline of the story that's dominated Marty Smith's life and the college football landscape. I think LSU is going to be another tough one for Duke. I don't foresee Duke winning against the Tigers, but hey, I think you make a good point. I mean, I think Ryan, who we had on earlier, had a great column about kind of the struggles Duke's faced so far this season and how it hasn't gone quite how people expected. Duke came in this season I think 7th in the country. People expect them to win the conference, be a contender for the national championship, and it really hasn't unfolded that way. There's a lot of season left. Conference play has not started yet, but so far it's definitely not been anything to write home about for Kara Lawson and company.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. It's the perfect time to turn around the season. Duke has a couple of lighter games after this. I will say light, but that's relative after this gauntlet slate. So who knows what we'll see. But exciting week for Duke Athletics. Thank you guys for listening to this amazing inaugural semester of the Blue Devil Beat. We've loved making these videos, talking to reporters across this country. This was a monster of an episode. If you are here all the way at the end, congratulations. You've made it. Enjoy this week of sports. You deserve it. Keep track of our coverage all week long on DukeChronicle.com. And thank you again for listening. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been Blue Devil Beat.